everything in the sharing economy. And I'm your host, Mark Anthony Peterson. This is the podcast where entrepreneurs, market leaders, market makers, and CEOs come to predict the future of the gig sharing and platform economy. Guys, it's another gigging news episode, and you know what that means. Elle and I are going to bring you the top stories for this month and give you our insights and hopefully a few laughs. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share it with a friend, give us a like and some comments. All those things help us beat those pesky algorithms and move up in the rankings. Thanks, guys. We appreciate all the support you've given us. And now, gigging news. Welcome to Gigging Everything in the Sharing Economy. And guys, we have another Gigging News episode, and we're so excited to share our top stories with you. Before we jump in, though, we have to introduce Eleanor Tucker. Eleanor, how are you doing?
I'm good, Mark. How are you?
I am having more fun than I deserve.
We have got so many good stories this month. I mean, I know we have good stories every month, but I'm excited about some of the ones we have today. And I'm excited about going back to a story that we were talking about last month, which is a nice little smooth intro into the world of WeWork and the documentary that I still haven't seen because I don't think it's available yet in the UK, but you have. And this is all about Adam-Neumann and the tale of WeWork. So how was it? Did you watch it straight after our episode last month?
I did. As soon as we wrapped, I went and watched the documentary, and I got to tell you, I was at the point where I was choked up watching the documentary because of the number of people that they interviewed who were still shaken from the process. The documentary really did capture the creation of that culture, and many people in the documentary drew parallels between the company and cults because they were talking about the company in terms of raising the global consciousness of individuals around the world as opposed to just renting desks in co-working spaces. And, it starts early on in the documentary talking about Adam-Neumann's executive assistant, who, in her own words, says she felt lost as a person and was looking for purpose. And she felt like WeWork gave her purpose because she believed in this message that they preached, that it was about connecting people towards a greater goal. And the company, used that thinking to make a lot of its acquisitions and to create a kind of a horizontal approach to this whole term we. So not only did they have WeWork, they had We Live, and We Live were apartments that were designed for people who had leases at WeWork. And so they were creating an entire ecosystem to keep the folks who were at WeWork within their network.
And did that part of it actually get off the ground, the We Live part?
It really didn't go as far as, say, the WeWork offices in terms of expanding to every major market. But in the places where it did get off the ground and they were fully booked, the people that they interviewed basically said it started to, again, feel like a cult because they never left the building. Their friends became the people who were in the building. You shared a lot of the same activities and events, and you started to see these building blocks of getting people locked into a lifestyle that was just this company. And so, that's one of the major elements that I think people bought into. And I'm not saying that part is bad, but when you couple that with excesses on the other side that contradict the basic messages that you're selling to employees and customers, that's where I think people felt damaged because a lot of the people they recruited to be a part of the senior teams took those jobs at extreme discounts to the market, believing in the message and believing that they could be a part or the future of WeWork, and only to find out that what was perceived as, say, equity in the company was not equity. They were giving employees the notion that they were getting equity when they were only getting the right to buy shares in the company at a certain price. And for even some senior level people, that amount of money that they could make amounted to no more than $2,000 to $3,000.
Wow.
And so when Neumann walked out of the company with a $1.5 billion exit, you could see how many of those folks felt like, this was all kind of built to serve him and not the people who put the time and energy in building out the company. And,
like they'd been duped, I suppose.
Oh yeah. That term was used consistently.
Really?
Yeah, because as they were working at below market rates, putting in excessive hours to keep the growth rate up, he bought a Gulfstream and was jetting off to different places. They were making acquisitions that didn't make sense, and it really did. You could see that downfall coming when you have a message being preached from the top that's not being followed by the people at the top, and that's so that when you start with that as the culture, you could see how that could lead to the excesses that left the balance sheet and the income statement a complete mess that the now current chief executive, Sandeep Mathrani, has had to deal with. I mean, about $15 billion in acquisitions that had to be either unwound or written off in investments that I think, could have made sense. And then there were other things that just didn't make sense. Like Adam-Neumann was receiving payments for what he claimed as a trademark on the word we, and that he was licensing that back to the company, and they were paying him $75,000 a year to use the word we as part of so it was a really eye-opening documentary into how you can create this momentum that fools even the smartest of investors and the brightest of employees into believing that they can change the world through the company.
I think with companies like WeWork and these great big companies like Airbnb, who we're going to talk about in a second, it's it's very easy, I think, for them to almost take advantage of employees, probably quite young employees as well, and who aren't used to maybe working in a company environment and do feel that they're part of something that's maybe more than they really are part of. And I think that, I really want to watch the documentary when it comes out. Does it take it up to kind of now? Does it tell us about what they're actually doing with the company now, apart from sort of obviously repairing the damage, where WeWork is going?
Yeah, it brings you up right to the point where Adam is forced to leave the company based on kind of scandalous events associated with the trip that he made to Israel, and got in trouble for taking marijuana on the plane and leaving it on the plane. Wow. It brings you up to that point where he's being forced out, given the $1.5 billion payout, and the new management is just stepping in and evaluating what the next steps are. So they didn't lay out the path forward. They just brought forth kind of the carcass, which was WeWork, and how quickly the valuation, which I think topped out at somewhere around $45 billion, quickly dropped down to under, 10 billion in a matter of weeks, particularly after he tried to go public, and people read through that and realized they just weren't ready for prime time. That document read more like a religious manual than it did a document about operating a company.
Gosh, no, I can't wait to watch it. So we talked briefly there about Airbnb, and obviously this is one of the big players, just like WeWork. They have obviously had their troubles over the last year or so, as many big travel-related companies have, and many big companies who aren't related to travel as well, just because of the pandemic. But certainly their prospects are looking a lot healthier now that they have done their IPO, which is obviously what WeWork didn't actually manage to do, did it? Did it manage to do its IPO in the end, or was the paperwork just not there?
They had to pull it in the end, and that was kind of one of the signs that you saw it was going to really go sideways. And they were hoping to get another round of money from SoftBank, which never came when the controversy hit. And so the IPO became the way to try to keep Adam in place and save the current strategic focus that he had laid out for the company. And he went on a dog and pony show with many high-level celebrities trying to sell the concept, and it just never did fly. And so they have now laid out a plan where they will merge with a company that's already public and get access to the capital markets via that path, which I think is a much smarter way for them to go about it. And so I think, based on what this new CEO is doing, they've cut, I think they said nearly 60% of the workforce. They still have over half the real estate that they had acquired underutilized. So they have some big problems that they have to solve. I think going this way gives them access to the capital to do that without the scrutiny of just going with an IPO, a standalone IPO for the company.
So this does lead us quite neatly into this story that I found to talk to you about, Mark, which was about Airbnb. It's on a website called Tech Explore. It's not a big website or one that I know, but I thought it was really interesting because it sounded to me like, a kind of a bit of a sort of, a PR story more than anything else. And Airbnb had obviously made this announcement, made a press announcement, and this website had picked up on this and turned it into a story. So when I read the headline, it said Airbnb sees massive travel rebound ahead. And I thought, well, that suits them, doesn't it? Airbnb said Thursday, this is last week, it expects a travel rebound unlike anything we have seen before. And I thought, well, gosh, that's a big statement. But then looking a bit further into it and realizing that they had, in fact, posted a 1.2 billion loss in the first quarter of this year, it's no wonder they want to create a bit of hype around a travel rebound, because that's the only thing that's going to save them. So it talks about that, and it talks about the fact that travel is showing signs of a strong rebound as the world starts to emerge from the pandemic. And I thought, well, maybe, maybe not. But I thought you were the perfect person to ask about this, because you are obviously an Airbnb host yourself. And I wanted to know, are you seeing a pickup as a host? And is this hype, or is this a real news story, Mark? I'm going to take your opinion as the truth.
I think it's fact. During the pandemic, the bookings were down to a trickle. And when I mean a trickle, they weren't really tourists. There were more contractors and seasonal workers in terms of plant shutdowns that were being booked into my property. There are a number of bigger players like Southern Company that operates the electrical grid, and they have to go through routine maintenance. There are plants that are associated with International Paper. And then some of your larger retailers use the pandemic as a time to upgrade their storefronts, remodel and shuffle the floor plans. And so a number of the bookings during the pandemic were people like that. Mm-hmm. In the last 3 weeks, bookings have almost, have all been exclusively tourist, and they have come so fast that I'm booked out through the end of July, which is on pace with some of the best years that Airbnb has had, at least from my perspective. So if I am an indicator mm-hmm. of what other markets are seeing, I think Airbnb looks to have a very good year and a good rebound in their stock based on those early signs. And
where are your travelers coming from, Mark? Are you just really internally within the States?
All over. So I guests just booked out that came in from St. Louis. Before that, New Orleans. I have a group coming in from Montana for the long weekend. After that, a group is coming in from Florida. A group of guys is coming in from Florida. I presume his wife is booking somewhere else with her friends because they're coming to Selma to renew their vows. And so they've
just not together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it, exactly. So yeah, I'm not seeing people doing staycations. These folks are coming in from all over the country and booking up in a small community mm-hmm. in Selma, Alabama. So if that's an indicator, I think Airbnb is looking for a strong rebound.
Yeah, the article says that Airbnb has said that its home sharing model has become more attractive during the pandemic. The more mm-hmm. people are using the service for longer term stays as well. I do think, and we have talked about this a while back during the first year of the pandemic, as it's now known, 2020, we've talked about how actually what an Airbnb model presents versus staying in a hotel is the opportunity for a bubble, a family unit to stay together and not have to interact with other people. So as long as the cleaning protocols are in place, etc., and the people are following the local rules that have been laid out for the pandemic, in a way, it does allow a safer form of travel than maybe a hotel where there are more shared public areas, etc.
Absolutely.
So I do see that. And, with a rise in staycationing, maybe traveling nationally rather than internationally, and people maybe wanting to isolate from large public groups, this is a type of home sharing of travel that will start to become even more important as this post-pandemic period goes on. So I know, and you know, that I have never liked the term the Airbnb for, but I'm going to use it now because that's the actual headline of the next article. And it does link, obviously, with the fact that we've just been talking about Airbnb. So obviously, people love saying the Airbnb for because it's a really good way of explaining something that follows the sharing economy model, and without having to, go into too much detail. People get Airbnb. It's the name that everyone knows, and it's a good way to explain how another type of sharing works. And sure enough, it's been used in a headline yet again. I'm sure if you Googled the Airbnb for and then searched under news, it would bring up about 200 articles. So this one is in the Huffington Post, and it says there's an Airbnb for garden rental, and here's how it works. So this is all about renting out your space, which is obviously the Airbnb model, but instead of it being a room in your house or your entire house, as we see on the Airbnb platform, it's actually your garden, and more specifically, your vegetable garden or your growing garden, although I think that's what garden means in the US. I've come across this before. You call your garden where you sort of sit and maybe have your barbecue your yard, don't you? And your garden is where you grow things.
Correct.
Yeah, we would say your garden. Yeah, because I said to someone I was sitting in the garden, and I think they thought I was sitting sort of in the vegetable patch. Which,
They're like, okay, wow. Thanks for sharing, Elle.
So what was interesting about this story is that I just chose to share it on my LinkedIn a week or so ago, and it got a huge response. Just I think people being really interested in seeing a different type of sharing economy company coming through. I tagged the founder. It's a UK company, so it's called AllotMe, all one word. And they are, I think, just starting out, and they are what the basic model is that because you have to go on a long waiting list for allotments. I don't know if this is a sort of a thing in the US. Actually, we have these. Do you have allotments in? So that's like a sort of vegetable patch for growing things, but they're all together, and you get a plot. It's maybe if you live in a flats or somewhere where you don't have a very big garden. Do you have that?
That's not a concept that is widespread in the US.
Right. It's quite a big thing here. And I think that maybe it's a smaller country, and I don't know, in urban areas, obviously, where people don't have as big a garden, this is a big thing. And I think they're very popular in London, and have been even more so during the pandemic. The National Allotment Society reported an uplift of more than 300% last year. So I think that, for people who have a home with a limited or no outdoor space, with the chance to grow vegetables, and that was becoming particularly popular in the pandemic, people at home, this allows people to rent spare outdoor space from local people where they can grow their own fruit and vegetables, or plants, or whatever they want to. And current listings on AllotMe are really only around £20 to £25 a month, it's saying in the article, which I think is a lot less than actually renting an allotment, which I think can be quite expensive. So the founder, a guy called Conor Gallagher, he was an architect, and he's now come up with this idea. So I posted about this on LinkedIn, and some interesting responses. And it turns out this isn't the first of its kind. And it's always interesting to hear from people in the sharing economy space who will often tell you a bit more about the model. There's a great lady called April Rinn, who I don't know if you follow on LinkedIn. She always shares great articles and knows quite a lot about the sharing economy space. And she flagged up on the comments on my post that a company called Landshare UK did this a few years ago. And theirs was a social mission, which actually was aimed at connecting elderly people who loved gardening but couldn't necessarily tend a garden full time. So that's a great idea. And somebody else flagged up a company called Lend and Tend, and actually connected me with the founder, and that's another similar model. So I think really interesting environmental benefits going on there. We're all trying to maybe make use of outdoor space, grow local, eat local, fantastic idea. So I was really pleased, apart from the Airbnb in the title, I was really pleased to read that story. And I know that you had found a similarly interesting idea around sharing your outdoor space, which I think fits in really well with this notion, because obviously, whereas in the UK we are unlikely to have a swimming pool in our garden, especially here in the freezing north, I think that's more commonplace in the US. So tell me a bit more about renting out your swimming pool.
Yeah, before I jump into that, the sharing around gardens is an interesting concept. You have certain startups here that are based around what we call agrotourism. And some of the farmers who were early to that movement came up with some approaches where they were offering to grow certain types of vegetables for people in urban areas. So you could call the farmer up or go online, book a plot and say, grow tomatoes for me. And when those tomatoes ripen, they pack them up and ship them to you in New York or Miami or Dallas, Texas, you could remotely garden by partnering with those farmers who wanted to carve up their lots into dedicated spaces for whatever you wanted to grow. So I thought that was kind of a cool complement. And then that spread to a couple of startups that will share a cow. So for beef lovers, you could partner up with your friends or counterparts, or they could match you with other people on the platform who wanted to pay for a cow, grow it, and then claim certain parts of the cow when it went to slaughter. And so, you have Omaha Steaks, which, ships certain cuts of steak directly to your door. They were targeting those types of consumers. And the benefit versus the Omaha model at the time is that you could specify everything about that journey from the time the calf is born to the type of food that it consumes. So if you were looking for grain fed or free range or whatever the preferences were of the owners, that farmer or that herdsman would execute that plan based on what was posted on the platform and then deliver the cuts to you at the appropriate time. So
cow sharing that's brand new to me, Mark. So I always learn something from you. Every day is school day with Mark.
There you go. So speaking of school day, when you get out of school, you want to get in that pool here in America. And like you say, there are a ton of swimming pools in America, about 10.6 million, according to this startup that is coming to America called Swimmy. They're a French startup, and they released a press release saying that they're coming to the U.S. because they want to tap into this 10.6 million swimming pools that we have, particularly in California, where there are 3 million of these pools available to be shared with your neighbors and people in your community. Swimmy, as I mentioned, is a French-based startup that competes with some other startups that we've talked about in the past that are all focused around taking advantage of your swimming pool, which is a great asset to have for your family, but it's not always used fully throughout the year. And so they've picked the best places where the pools are available, but probably underutilized to launch in the U.S., being California, because you got great weather all year. Texas, mild winters, extremely hot summers, so the pool's available pretty much all year. And Florida, again, much like Texas, weather that allows you to use the pool all year, but you may not because you got other stuff to do. So they're tapping into that market and making the pools available for rent by other people in the community who want to utilize them. And I hate to use the term, but it's very similar to the term you just used earlier, kind of the Airbnb of pools. And they're trying to make their name now known in the U.S. So according to them, based on all these pools that we have in the U.S., that swimming, and I never knew this, is the fourth most popular outdoor activity in the United States. So, and they've done pretty well outside of the U.S. They have 120,000 European users on the platform. So I guess somebody in Europe there had some pools.
I think Italy are using this as well, because when I did a search and had a look to see a bit about them, there were some Italian articles about it. So I'm guessing they're there as well, because there's a lot of pools in the Mediterranean, isn't there?
Right, absolutely. And so, when we talked about this with their competitor, I think it was Swimply, right, was the competitor that we talked about.
That's right.
This sharing model has an opportunity to get traction, particularly when you had kind of shelter-in-place orders where people couldn't go very far, had to stay out in the open to give themselves a little bit more protection from the virus. You got competitors like Swimmy were able to tap into that, get traction, and I think now they believe is the right time to expand as people are looking to get outdoors and have fun.
I wonder what Swimply think about that. I reckon because Asher, the two founders, Asher and Boonim, I think their guys are, they New York-based actually. They will probably be pleased that this, I mean, maybe not so pleased that the name is so similar, but I think that when another platform with the same concept starts to scale outside of their, the country that they were founded in, it shows there's an appetite for the idea. It shows that, there's uptake, and, I think this is good news. It's good competition, isn't it, for them? So hopefully this will, open people's eyes to it. It gives people choice. So, hopefully that's good news.
I think it is. It certainly, when there are multiple players, it's easier for people in the financial markets, those venture capitalists, to wrap their head around whether or not there's real value there. Mm-hmm. And then it also, at some point, because there are a finite number of pools available, means that they may have someone that they can merge with or acquire to help them accelerate their growth. But yeah, I agree with you. It's good news, and it's probably going to be good news for the residential hosts as well as those who want to get access to a pool.
We're going to talk a bit about the gig economy, because obviously we like to discuss both gig and sharing models. And I found an article in Fortune, and this was about women and the gig economy. And I thought you would find this interesting, Mark, because it talks about the model itself, and it's not very specifically talking about news about a particular brand, but I did think it was very interesting, and about a real uptake during the pandemic for women to work, obviously sort of more flexibly, but being able to, which is something that, women have wanted to do for ages. And this all fits into the future of work and how this can benefit women in the long run. And just to sort of talk about my own sort of personal story when it comes to work, when I became a freelance writer, when I was first at home with my young children with babies, this was, considered at the time, and, it's not that long ago, quite unusual, really. I think people felt that it was quite unusual for me to be self-employed and working in this, what I suppose is really a gig fashion, freelancing, consulting, contracting, all these sorts of self-employed work. At the time, it felt like people didn't really sort of fully understand that. The reason I did it was because I needed that flexibility. And obviously, traditionally, the 9 to 5 is quite inflexible. But what we've seen during the pandemic is more people working from home, and people, unfortunately, maybe being furloughed or laid off their job, seeking maybe more flexible working arrangements by using gig platforms. And in a way, it's like, it makes me think back to, a decade ago when I was at home with, working around young children and wishing in a way there'd been gig platforms at that point. I remember there was People Per Hour had popped up around that point, but I think most people were quite, slightly suspicious of getting work that way. So it was quite interesting. And I can see how the gig economy actually, is really helpful for the way that women need to work often around a family to, and to be more flexible. And something that came up in this article, which I thought was particularly interesting, was about how women often don't think of, women aren't thought necessarily of working in the gig economy because people associate brands like Uber and DoorDash with the image of a sort of independent workforce. But actually, women make up a greater share of income earners on digital platforms. I thought that was really interesting. And this is all around e-commerce websites like Etsy, where 85% of the independent sellers are women. And also this expands to gig platforms that we've discussed before over the last few months. And it's things like dog walkers, massage therapists, nutritionists, translators, proofreaders. These are often majority female independent roles. Being able to access this work via technology, via platforms in this on-demand way is making it much easier for women to actually, structure their work and be independent, have that flexibility and have more time to care for whether it's children or, elderly parents or, relatives or whatever. And I think it's a real benefit to the gig economy. So I think what we're learning from this is not to necessarily think about the Uber and DoorDash world of the gig economy, and actually think about the freedom that allows women to access this flexible work around a caring role.
I agree with that. I came across a stat, and I wish I had written it down, but the nature of the stat basically said the closer households become to the partner sharing the household work on a 50-50 basis, that you would unlock a close to a percent increase in the global GDP just by tapping into many of the workers that you just described, females who have had to have a shift in their career because of starting a family and having to work from home. The more of those home tasks that are shared, it unlocks the value for those individuals to utilize their skill sets, and that the gig economy is opening those opportunities up in more ways than were imagined, say, 10 or 15 years ago. So I absolutely agree with that. And we've seen it in other parts of the developing economy, parts of Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa have seen tremendous spikes in the value that women are contributing to the household because of the ability to have work schedule flexibility and work from home options. And if that continues into the white collar economy, you're going to unlock even more value, in my opinion. And the pandemic has proved that it can happen even for Fortune 500 companies, because they've had the majority of their workforce at home, and you haven't seen a drop off in productivity.
No, yeah.
So there's some real opportunities to make sure that our best and brightest get an opportunity to continue to contribute and also enjoy having the lifestyle that they want.
I think it's just one of many ways in which the pandemic has forced change. But at the same time, this change was too slow to be happening anyway. So it's a good thing, definitely. And I think when we talk about some of these roles, these gig roles, it leads us quite neatly into a story that you had found that's come all the way from Asia, which is about the gig economy for actually a role which is probably more male dominated. So tell me about that.
So this story comes to us from the Digital News Asia, and the article focuses in on a company called Pomen and their drive to create mobilepreneurs who are mechanics. So if you own a car, the hassle of trying to get the car serviced, booking appointments, and getting the car, the basics, oil changes and basic repairs have been a real hassle for individuals and an impairment, particularly given the story that we just talked about, for individuals who are working from home during the pandemic and may not have the time to walk away from their desk during working hours to get the car serviced. So these mobile mechanics now who are equipped with a scooter and a toolbox that is affixed to the back of the scooter, they come to you and perform the service in your driveway. And this is a story that we've talked about earlier in last year when we talked about how parking and renting parking spaces, particularly in urban settings, afforded the opportunity for you to get other ancillary services like having your car oil change, having the car washed. And these sorts of startups are starting to piggyback off that trend. Instead of you going to the service provider is coming to you. And so Pomen recently launched, they're driving towards trying to get 5,000 mechanics signed up on the platform and equipping them with these scooters so that they can go to where you are and meet the demand. And in the toolbox, they have a variety of service, basic service calls that they can meet. Like I mentioned, changing your oil, basic fixes to the car, changing the windshield wipers. So a lot of the things that you see marketed by, say, your auto parts retail chains, they can do that right from the back of the scooter. And I love that. I love that for the potential that it unlocks for people who want more work and life flexibility. This gives it to the mechanic, and it also opens up more flexibility for those individuals working at home who now suddenly don't have the option to be able to get up and go take their car to the shop.
And it probably allows people who actually, are out there needing the support to maybe access something that will, be cheaper, come more quickly, than maybe dealing with some of the big brands. I know I've been stuck, out in the road with a broken down car before and, had to wait there 2 or 3 hours. It could be that this sort of on-demand technology will allow help to come more quickly. Right,
exactly. And see, when you look at what they're doing and making it really a mobile service, there are corollaries to that, at least in the U.S., through players like AAA that provide you roadside assistance. And you see it with your bigger brands, your Teslas, your Mercedes, your Porsche. They will provide roadside assistance for the vehicles that they sell. But for everyone else trying to get that sort of service, it has not been easy or affordable. This markets itself as doorstep service minus the high labor charge. And so I think this has a real opportunity of catching on outside of Asia, particularly in some of the more dense urban markets here in the U.S.
And do you know that when I first spotted this article that you told me about, I actually read it as Pokemon because it looks a bit like that. And I was just thinking how delighted my kids would be if we called a mechanic to our broken down car and it turned out to be Pikachu that arrived.
Pikachu, exactly. If Pikachu showed up to fix my truck, that would make my year. Exactly. I have a little Pikachu here sitting on my desk. And so if Pikachu showed up, yeah, we probably wouldn't end up getting the truck fixed. We'd just be playing all day. But I do love this trend. And the CEO, Syed Zulemi Sharif, I think has done an excellent job. He's been awarded many different startup and scale up awards there in Malaysia for this platform. And fortunately for him, in that part of the world, scooters and motorized bicycles are commonplace. And so having them integrated with a car service that can provide doorstep service to the consumer, if he can make it work there, I think this could be a really powerful platform here in the U.S.
Definitely. Look forward to seeing how it evolves and scales beyond this particular country.
Absolutely. Well, look, we've done it again. We've gone through and covered all the great and top stories for this month, and we got a few laughs in as well.
We did, Mark. It was great, and always interesting stories every month from around the world. So it's brilliant to be able to sort of connect them all up and really kind of talk about them in a bit more depth and how they all link.
Exactly. So from myself, Elle, and Pikachu, guys, we want to thank you for listening and tune in another couple of weeks when we bring you another episode of Gigging News.
We really hope you liked this episode. If you did, again, please subscribe, give us a like or a comment, and please share with your friends. What's next for Gigging Everything in the Sharing Economy? We have an interview with Bronwyn Morgan. Elle is going to hate me for saying this, but Bronwyn Morgan's startup, Zeno Air, is the Uber and the Airbnb of drones. So subscribe and catch that episode where I and guest host Monica Hooks interviews Ms. Bronwyn Morgan, CEO of Zeno Air. Okay, guys, you know what time it is. It's time for me to let you go and get back to it. But I can't let you go without telling you what you hear at the end of every episode. If your business is not disrupting, it might be about to start dying. Till next time, guys. Peace.